Hi, everybody. My name is George White. I'm the SVP of Innovation at Cantina. Cantina is a digital agency that plans, designs, builds, and delivers digital experiences, connected experiences. That means basically at the end of the day, we build apps, we build websites, we do web services. We also do a lot of user experience and design as well. Thanks all for joining me. Today's talk is about analytics and modeling, why knowing everything about your customers won't be enough. I'm going to just give a couple of slides to set the stage, and then we'll meet our panel. Just to quickly go through what we have on our panel today, we have Joan Abrams, who's the Director of E-commerce at Ross Simons, Mike Putnam, SVP of Mobile at Kayak, and Mike actually is new to Kayak, so we won't ask him a whole lot of questions about that just yet. And Scott Stroud, who's the Vice President. Scott, I think I might have your title wrong. Marketing and Strategy at Rulala. So delivering on omnichannel experiences is really, really hard. I'm sure this is not news for most of you. As we look at what's happening these days, we've gone from multi-channel to omnichannel to now multi-screen. We have all these different channels that people want to track their consumers on. They want to understand what user behavior is. They're trying to figure out how does mobile affect what happens inside of retail stores? How does mobile affect what happens with traditional e-commerce? There's a lot of things going on there. There's concerns with things like showrooming, on-the-go comparison shopping. And traditional e-commerce is really affected as well. And what we're really looking to try and understand is basically, how do we have a deep understanding of consumer behavior? How do we start to look at what users are doing today, what they're going to do tomorrow, and actually target what we're trying to reach in terms of message and in terms of delivering an experience that will allow them to actually convert to the thing that we want to convert to, which is typically usually buying our products. So the question comes up, can we use analytics to understand how consumers shop today? And I think this is sort of a solved problem, right? We know that we can, in fact, use analytics for this. It's not news. We've been doing it for years. But now that we have this explosion of information that we've got, we're starting to try and understand, okay, well, how do I know what's happening, say, in the mobile space? And how does that relate to the desktop space? How does that relate to what's happening in store? How do I tie all these pieces together? There's some question about whether or not big data can actually solve this problem for us. So we can look at this huge confluence of information coming in, and we just have to capture it all. And it sounds great at first, but we're starting to realize that knowing what we can capture is great, but it doesn't actually lead us to any results. We don't have any action that we can take from it because we're still not sure exactly what the behaviors are. We have a lot of information, but we don't necessarily have a lot of results. So we're collecting more information than we ever have before. And the tools that we're trying to use are still evolving. We're still getting there on understanding exactly what's happening out in the world. So, the question, and this is really the first question for the panel, is, where do we go from here? What's the result that we're trying to get to? So, Mike, do you want to start with just an introduction of yourself, and we'll go from there?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay in the back? Great. Great to be here. Awesome conference. And excited to talk about analytics and how to use analytics and modeling to help improve customer experiences and businesses. So I just started at Kayak yesterday. Before that, I was at Rulala. So let's talk a lot about Kayak. Rulala is a great company, wonderful people. So I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about that. Before that, I led mobile for TripAdvisor for a couple of years. In the early days, that we actually built a Palm app, if you can believe that. Those days are long gone, but very interested in talking about this. I think to your question, where do we go from here? I think planning for constant change is just what you have to do. There are always new tools. Vendors that you use for analytics are always launching new things, figuring out how to integrate new technologies. Anybody out there lucky enough to have an iPhone 5S? Don't lynch them. It has the fingerprint scanner, right? New technology, new capabilities. It'll be constant change.
Yeah, cool. Joan?
Hi, I'm Joan Abrams, and I'm Director of E-commerce for Ross Simons, and we're a jeweler located outside of Providence. Company's been in business for 60 years, but we're, like everybody else, having challenges with mobile and social and data and all the issues that this conference is talking about today. Just a little bit of background on Ross Simons. We've recently gone through a brand change, and we still have our Ross Simons website, which is the really the bulk of all of our e-commerce business. But we rebranded our retail stores, of which there are about 13. We rebranded them to Sidney Thomas, and we also recently launched the Sidney Thomas website. So we're now really working on both of those brands. Different strategies, and I can get into that later with anybody who wants to know, but that is what Ross Simons is up to.
Hi, as Mike might have mentioned, I work at Real. My name is Scott Stroud. I am I run our insights, analytics, and forecasting team. For those of you who aren't familiar with Real, we are a proud Boston-based company. We're out of Southie. We sell amazing brands at great prices for a very limited amount of time. I'll kind of echo something Mike said. I definitely think that one of our biggest challenges moving forward is just the kind of the continued and constant churn of the newest provider, the newest analytics solution. Also kind of say the other challenge for us is how do we think about convergence? One of the really interesting things about Rue is that we do about 40% of our sales on mobile. And it's only a matter of time before that becomes kind of the dominant portion of our business. And so really getting a great understanding of how members interact both on our traditional kind of big web site and everything they do on mobile, and making sure that the data sources and the analytics behind those in the past relatively distinct channels become more and more unified is certainly something we spend a lot of time thinking about.
Cool. So I guess actually, Scott, I'll start with you. In terms of the role that analytics play at Rue, obviously, as you just mentioned, you guys are using it to try and help understand your customer behaviors. But do you guys consider yourselves to be data-driven? How do you think about analytics, and does it come first, or is it something that sort of follows on?
Yeah. To be fair, I think the answer is certainly we are. I hope everyone in this room, we're a data-driven company, right? Like you'd be foolish not to make decisions based on data. And we certainly, every time we launch a new product, every time we measure the results of campaigns, we're looking at that. At the same time, I will say, we like to balance. Real was formed as a result of just a pretty good good hunch in terms of the assets that we had and what it might be. And we certainly want to always marry that with not blindly following everything that must be kind of data-driven, because we never would have been where we are. And like any great retailer, you occasionally have to make some hunches on things. But everything we do from a marketing standpoint, and certainly everything we try to do from a product standpoint, is always going to be looked at beforehand in terms of understanding how will this impact our business. And then obviously measuring the impact of all the changes we make and the campaigns we run is paramount to our success. The biggest role data provides today is, and we think will provide in the future, is really, for us, is about providing a better personalized shopping experience. One of the complexities, so we launch, I don't know, anywhere from, say, 12 to 20 new events, we call them, every day, and each event will have a new brand or a series of brands in it. And, understanding whether or not Mike should have Cole Haan or Brooks Brothers first is really important to us. And so being able to use data to help drive kind of the shopping experience is something we've already spent a lot of time on and will continue to spend a lot more time on in the future.
Gotcha. Cool. So Joan, I think I'll put the same question to you. So what is the role of analytics within your organization? I mean, what are you guys really using it for day to day?
Yeah, I would agree that we are also a data-driven company. I mean, Ross Simons has a history in the catalog business, so catalogs have always been data-driven in terms of segmentation, circulation. The same metrics are applied to the online activity, and now it's just exploded. But shopping for jewelry can't just be an analytical experience. It has to be appealing for the customer. The customer has to be engaged, excited, motivated to buy. So it's just as much about the user experience, and maybe more so than the analytics in terms of what we present to the customer and what we offer her and how she engages with us.
So would it be fair to say then that analytics isn't necessarily a driver for you? It's more of a tool to confirm what you already know?
Well, it's probably a guider, right? So it's guiding us in terms of what might be important to the customer, but we are certainly going to apply our own aesthetic to how that experience should be, and really try to make it beautiful, engaging, and inspiring for her.
Gotcha. So Mike, or In terms of, again, the sort of challenges that we're seeing in the omnichannel world, you mentioned mobile, which is obviously a big driver. And Joan and I were actually talking about this before the panel started. How do you see mobile changing what you know about your customers, and how are you segmenting that user, looking at that channel versus other channels that you have to deal with?
It's a great question. I think part of it, obviously you have customers that are interacting with your business in many different ways, through many different interfaces and in many different places. And Rulala has done studies around that, and I think that they found that customers who use desktop web, mobile, and tablet are worth 6 times as much, like incredibly more valuable. And the thing that's hard to tell is it because your best customers are just choosing to interact with you in all different ways, or is it that the experience is so much better, they actually buy more? So It's a very difficult thing to parse out. But to your point, what data do you gather? I think one of the really interesting things to see is just usage trends. When do people tend to be on a phone? When do they tend to be on a tablet? And what you see, I think, is that people are on phones when they're away from their computers. Not a big surprise. So lunchtime, evening, weekends. But then tablet usage really spikes in the evening when people are on their couches. People talk about tablets as the perfect couch computer. And one of the challenges, how do you take advantage of that knowledge? And another thing would be tracking location. You can start to discern, are people at home or not? So as an example, Rulala is in the home goods business. You can buy furniture and art and decorations and things. And the perfect time to pitch you stuff to decorate your house is while you're on your couch at home, not while you're on vacation. So lots of opportunity there.
Right, gotcha. So actually I wanted to come back to something, and this is for anybody who wants to answer this one, but in terms of something you just said about intention, right? So analytics is great for behavioral analysis. We can look at what people are doing, and we can say, okay, great. So I know that you were on an iPad, and then you later on went to the website, or maybe you had an in-store experience. We can look at that. But how do we know about intention, and how much does that matter? In terms of how we market to someone, how we direct our messages to them.
Give one example. I think intention is important because we have different types of shoppers at Ross Simons. So we have the male who is going to our site specifically to search for diamond stud earrings for a gift for his significant other. And that shopping experience, that intention is very different than a woman who wants to treat herself to something really pretty and beautiful. And so she's going to be shopping, and she's going to be browsing and and going to be discovering items that she may like. So there's very different intentions, very different path to purchase.
Does that have an effect on personalization too? I mean, what you're basically showing someone. So you mentioned before, Joan, the idea that Amazon might show you a chainsaw, right? And you're like, well, I'm here to shop for books or something else. It may be related to something you've done in the past, but knowing what your context is right now, and is there a way to sort of tease that out with what you see from user behavior or user analytics?
I think there probably is. We haven't figured that out yet.
Right.
But certainly if we knew the user's intention when he or she got to the site, we would give them a different experience. So we probably need to do a better job in trying to gauge that and even asking them and using all the analytics to figure out that intention.
Gotcha.
I'll answer this a slightly different way. I think one thing we know about the Rulala model is that people want to come in, they want to be able to, I think I mentioned a few minutes ago, like we offer a lot of brands at any one time. And people, the way they kind of intend to come to our site and interact is generally they come in a little after 11 a.m. Or at other times when we launch events, and they kind of quickly peruse and see if anything catches their eye, and if so, they'll go in and try to shop it. And because we have a limited quantity, they usually tend to act fast. And so their intent is to basically go in, be able to quickly understand what's for sale, and then quickly check out. And so from an intent standpoint, knowing that, so rather than personalization, what we've actually tried to think about is how do we structure the channels? And for us, the two big channels are big web and mobile apps. How we would actually allow someone to do that, quickly come in and understand what's for sale and see if they want to be able to buy that, is pretty different. And so for apps, like we need to be able to figure out ways that they can quickly filter down and be able to see everything. And so we've done a lot of work to try to make it easier for them to quickly understand what's for sale and am I interested in buying it. And then implemented things like our quick buy program where, it's just a matter of like checking a button and they end up checked out already. But that's a very different situation, particularly for like filtering and other things than big web, because there's so much more real estate that we want to try to figure out. Being able to quickly filter only by men just isn't that important on big web because it's a lot easier to see. And so we've done other things to optimize the site experience and the design that still accomplish that same goal, but are very different and distinct than what we would think about doing on apps.
Gotcha. So I'm going to ask a technology question. Are there particular technologies or systems out there that you're finding to be particularly useful in solving some of the problems that you're seeing in terms of user analytics or user data? Anybody?
What do you want to take?
Oh, go ahead.
Mike, you're the guy. Yeah, you're the one.
I think again, it's evolving quickly. I think the tools are getting better and better. One thing that companies have experimented with would be things like A/B testing. Right? Mm-hmm. That's getting much easier to do. So Rue has been experimenting with an A/B testing platform from a company called Artisan, and it's very new because, as you know, when you do a native app, you have to submit it to Apple. If you're on iOS, it might take a week to approve, and if you're doing tests in that sequence, you might have a 2 to 4 week lag time before you can put a new test up and change it. So what this new company came up with is the ability to do certain kinds of tests on the fly. You don't have to resubmit the app, and actually people can create tests that are not, you don't need an engineer to create it.
Nice.
And that's incredibly powerful. And until a few months ago, or maybe 6 months ago, it wasn't possible. And just an example of one of the things that Rue learned from that, there's a very important page they have that lets you invite your friends to join the service. So critical acquisition channel, absolutely fundamental to the business. And they try to test where all they did is move the buttons on a page. Functionality, not different at all. And the buttons were sort of squished to the bottom of a page, kind of hard to hit them with your thumb. All they did is move them up and space them out. The conversion on that page was 40% better. And it took maybe 2 weeks of testing to do that. So incredible new technology. I think one of the areas that's also been extremely useful would be analytics. So Localytics, great local firm. They're really expanding out into lots of related services. So one example would be in-app marketing, where if you want to, someone comes into your app and you want to pitch them a shipping deal, or you want to show them a product that's particularly interesting to them, you can do that very easily. It's kind of like a content management system. And then also, I think they've also just launched a product that it's not totally new. People like Mixpanel have it that lets you very easily map out your funnels. So if you're in the e-commerce business or other businesses where you're trying to land customers or get them to buy things, those funnels are so crucial. And so small changes can make such big differences. Like those tools are getting a lot better than they were a year ago.
Right. So actually I want to ask a question about that. You mentioned A/B testing, which is a great thing. I think hopefully everyone's doing at least some of that out there. But how do you arrive at making those decisions about who to test and how to test, right? So it's great to do A/B testing, but you have to have some notion of what your experiment's going to be up front, right? You've got to ask the question, what am I trying to change? So you mentioned, squishing the buttons. How did you arrive at that? And was that driven from an understanding of the user base, or was it simply, let's give it a try and see what happens?
And Mike, feel free to jump in as well, because you have similar experience. The way we've done it, and we'll continue to approach it, is there's our models, again, there's certain leverage points, right, that are vital to the success of our business. Registration is a kind of a unique one for us. We are members only. It's vital. I mean, that is like one of the major choke points on a kind of our overall funnel. Obviously, conversion, navigation. And so we've essentially just identified what we describe as kind of like the key choke points from that conversion funnel and said, what are the tests that we think can generate the highest ROI, or what are the things, what are the variables we could test, and then what are the kind of the variants on that we think will be most likely to impact change. And so for us, it's more about a kind of the way we're approaching moving forward is more about a portfolio approach. Like we know we want to be testing along the various choke points, and then just kind of managing it in a way such that we can, prioritize within kind of that broader portfolio. But it's we're usually going in with a pretty clear plan of what we should be going moving forward with next, and always making sure that they're focused on the 2 or 3 things that we care most about and will ultimately lead to the highest success in the business.
Gotcha. Cool. So
if I could just
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
to that, I think that's absolutely right. And I think there are also lots of different kinds of tests. Like sometimes you think about testing and you focus only on A/B testing. We have 2 versions running at the same time. It's very quantitative. But there's also the, walk down the hall and show a design to somebody who hasn't seen it test, or there's the Starbucks test, or the, person on the street, or, focus groups. And I think sometimes people get a little test happy or test crazy,
Right.
and they think they have to do multivariate tests of absolutely everything, and they forget that there's a cost to running a test. You have to design it, you have to project manage it, you have to QA it, and often you won't learn anything by doing it. So don't test everything. Lots of conversations that I remember at TripAdvisor where they'd say, "What are you going to learn from this test?" And you'd say, "Well, I'm 99% sure that this design is going to be better." And they said, "Well, don't do the test then, because it takes time. So don't." And I think doing the simplest test that you possibly can. And another good example of that, TripAdvisor's unofficial motto is "Speed wins." It's in pencil on the CEO's door because he didn't have time to print it out. Literally,
Really speedy.
Right, very speedy. And they do this thing called a 404 test, which if they want to know if they want to build a new feature, and this is well known, sometimes what they do is they just stick a button on the page that has the new feature on it, and when you click it, it goes to an error page. Not a great customer experience, but they have so much traffic they can show that to maybe 0.1% of their traffic and just see how many people click it, and it tells them very quickly, should we invest more effort into this? And there were projects we looked at that to build the feature would have taken a month of time. They said, do a 404 test. It took 1 hour of developer time, put it up on the site, didn't work at all, and we didn't spend a month of time. So
Gotcha.
really successful.
That's a great idea, actually. I wish I'd thought of that one.
The other, the other thing I'll add on is A/B testing is great. The other thing we've done is to build on Mike's non-obvious testing. We've seen a lot of success. We're an e-commerce player, and so one of the areas that I think we've seen probably more success than I would have guessed and wasn't obvious to me when we started is testing a lot around just our general merchandise strategy, like how much is too much. And for us, that was maybe something not as obvious as changing the call to action buttons or what our registration flow looks like. But there's some things that are kind of, we just always assumed more products better or more events is better. And what we found is that maybe that's not always the case. And so there's probably some things that are just again not obvious or maybe not shared or common across all your businesses that are obviously very key decisions you make and have always been that way. And I think when we've stepped back and thought about some of the things we've done, we're like, maybe we should actually try and doing something that's a little bit different and have changed some of our policies rather than our site to reflect that.
Gotcha. So I'd like to go to an area that we kind of touched on a couple of times. But Joan, I'd like to start with you. How is mobile affecting your understanding of user behavior, and how is it affecting your users overall, your consumers? Obviously, you're in a traditional business. People are shopping at a physical site. Does this change things for you?
Yeah, mobile is challenging for our business. I think, Rule Allah makes it dangerously easy to buy via mobile, and you're checked out, and the item is on the way to you before you even know it, which is fantastic. But we have a very different business, and we can't require our customers to be members, so we don't necessarily know who they are when they come to the site, and a lot of times they're shopping, browsing, and really trying to discover something that they find beautiful. So on a desktop, they may be able to see 120 search results, which they can scan through pretty quickly. On mobile, that experience is very difficult. We have a mobile optimized website, but it uses the foundation, the navigation from our our desktop site. So it just makes it fit on the small screen and makes the buttons usable and things like that. But it's still very click or tap based, and it's just not a great experience. So we are trying to figure out how to make the shopping experience, the discovery experience better on mobile, and really take advantage of the inherent gesture features of the phone. And right now, it doesn't. So it's definitely a challenge.
So another question for you on that same subject, actually, Joan. So in terms of the way that you look at user behavior, mobile versus desktop, are you seeing that there's some congruence there? Are you seeing differences? Do you guys try and lump them together, or do you sort of try and separate them?
Well, I mean, in terms of the analytics on mobile versus desktop, certainly the conversion rate is lower on mobile than it is on desktop, because I think that experience is just more challenging. We're finding that more customers are opening their emails on mobile. I'm sure everybody else is finding that. 40% of our emails are opened on a mobile device, and that means that those customers, if they click through, are going to our mobile site, and then the conversion rate is lower. So it's definitely a challenge, and that's one of our big focuses for this year, is to try to make that user experience much better.
Right. And then as a brick and mortar retailer, do you guys see mobile and your physical stores having some interaction over time, or do you have a model for that?
It's a little bit different. We, because we're selling a high-end jewelry product, I mean, we're not going to be doing any, if someone is in the physical location in the mall, they're not going to get, a notification on their phone for a coupon. The jewelry we sell in retail is going to average $750 as their average ticket. So that's a much different experience than some other retailers. So we don't necessarily see mobile and the physical stores interacting as much, except that our salespeople are using some of the features on a mobile phone or on a tablet to really help the customer drill down to find the perfect diamond or something like that. So the salespeople may be using mobile devices, but not as much the customers.
Gotcha. Scott, obviously Rue is native to this sort of multi-screen experience. I mean, you guys have been in it for a long time, from the beginning really, and you're moving back and forth. How do you think about the mobile behavior and congruence with the rest of the experience that you have? You're obviously big web. Is it seen as a seamless single environment that you want people to move back and forth through, or do you think about it more, mobile buyers versus, say, tablet buyers versus?
No, for us, it's all about the multi-screen buyer. I mean, in our ideal world, you're shopping from us in every which way you can, and as a result, we're thinking it like that. I think in the past, when mobile was 10-15% of our business, we might have been more willing to accept, oh yeah, we'll do that on mobile later, and whatever you might be able to do on big web, whatever, we'll figure out how to get to it on mobile. That mindset has changed. I'll give Mike a lot of credit actually for helping us change that mindset. And in the future, where our goal is to basically make sure that the experience and the types of things that we can do if we roll out a feature on big web, how does that translate to app? Because the last thing we want you to do is like go to big web and say, oh, I love this or that, and then go to your app and find that it's not there. Because as Mike mentioned earlier, like we're 11 to 1, we're still seeing more people shop on big web, but on nights and weekends, it's an app that is the dominant way that people browse and purchase on our site. And to have that kind of a jarring difference in terms of the experience is obviously less than ideal. We know people will look on one and buy on another, and we know people expect that kind of commonality that we're looking to strive. Certainly we approach how we actually implement things very differently to help optimize for whatever channel we're doing. But we want to make sure that the experience is as absolutely seamless as we can. And whatever, we're still not all the way there, but we're a lot better than we were a couple years ago.
Gotcha. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to build on that, I think that Rue has done a lot of things to make sure that their experience is consistent across platforms. Some of it is look and feel, and it's little things like on the iPhone app or the iPad app or the desktop app, their logo's centered. They have a black bar beneath their logo that has navigation options. And what that does is it helps the person who's used to shopping the desktop site go get the iPhone app, and they instantly know what to do. The gestures are different. You know, to switch categories on the desktop, you're moving your mouse and you're clicking. On the iPhone, you're just swiping, which is faster. But the way of thinking of it is the same, and it really helps people adopt it much more quickly. I think the other challenge, we recognize that increasingly people will be buying on multiple different interfaces, their phone, their tablet, et cetera, is having a smooth handoff between them. And we all know how difficult those handoffs can be. Look at the session before this and this session, right? It's like, oh, geez, we got to,
Right.
Where's the table, right?
Right.
So handoffs are hard. And at Rue, there's been a lot of hard work going on to make that much more smooth. And you know, one example of that is, say you have your phone right next to your tablet, and you go to your phone and you add something to your cart. Instantly on Rue a Lot, it also will show up on your iPad as being in your cart with the little number over the icon that notifies you. So that's very smooth. But there are other things like, you know, if you get an email, to your point, I think 50% of emails are open on phones these days, certainly true for Rue. If you click that, are you going to go into your website or your mobile website or your app? Where do you want people to go to? I think that people have seen that pretty consistently. Conversion in apps is better than websites, so you really want to drive them into your app if you can, and that's hard. And so Rue's just doing that bit by bit. Now, if you get a notification on your phone, it says, "Hey, we've got a great deal on Cole Haan shoes." If you tap that notification, it goes straight into your app if you have it. And 6 months ago, Rue wasn't doing that, so it's bit by bit.
So you mentioned something, actually, in terms of driving them from, say, Big Web to the app or Big Web to another mobile experience. So for you guys, obviously, or at least when you were at Rue, it was fairly easy to track, say, my behavior because I'm identified as me all the time, right? You know who I am, I'm registered, that's the biggest gate you have. If you don't have that advantage, right, if you don't have the situation of knowing who the user is explicitly in multiple environments, what's the solution? I mean, how are we supposed to know, you know, okay, great, you've done something over here, you're doing something over there. How do we start to match them up? And what kind of things would you think about in terms of understanding users' behaviors as they move from environment to environment?
I just would say that it's very challenging. I mean, Rue is in a great position of having the membership requirement because people have an incentive to sign in. I mean, that's a requirement, but there's also a big incentive to do it. And some other retailers are doing a good job of having incenting people to sign in every different device, but we're not there yet, clearly, and it's very, very challenging to keep track of the customers across devices.
Let's switch gears a little bit. So in terms of analytics itself, where have you had pitfalls or problems? You're obviously looking at this huge amount of data coming in. You're trying to understand user behavior from it. You're trying to understand what you should do next. How do you parse that? How do you move from, okay, great, I've got an amount of data in front of me, to moving to an action?
Yeah, I would just say that the biggest challenge is making sure that the data is actionable, because you can get really distracted by the bright shiny object in the corner, which is some new piece of data or some new statistic that you're able to calculate, and you can get excited about that, but then is it really actionable?
Right. So on that note, when you say is it actionable, when are you asking that question? Is it before you're trying to collect the data? Afterwards? I mean, how do you make some decisions about what you're collecting and when and why?
I mean, the collecting isn't so hard because it's just mountains, of data, and it's really analyzing it and trying to figure out what you're going to roll out. I loved the 404 example. That's fantastic. I wish I thought of something so brilliant. But one of the things that we're doing is looking at email open and click data, and seeing if people who are active with our emails, opening and clicking, see if we can mail them fewer catalogs. And so far that's turned out to be very actionable. And it's something that changes constantly because their engagement with email changes weekly, monthly. But that is something that has turned out to be actionable. A lot of other things haven't been, but that's a key, I think.
Gotcha. Go ahead, Scott.
I'll just when you're questions or sub-questions was about pitfalls. I think where we've run into challenges occasionally is when we are almost too led by the data. So, for like personalization is a great example. We have an algorithm that kind of allows us to understand, oh, you should see this offer, and then this offer, and then this offer, and so on and so forth. And occasionally when we've tweaked with it or when we originally rolled it out, we were almost so blind as to, well, these are the rules that should be in place, and this is how the underlying algorithm should work, that we forgot that there's probably some overarching business rules that we need to make sure we account for. And so my favorite example is we don't launch as many men's events as I frankly would like. And one day, the only men's event we launched was men's Spanx. And
was it a sellout?
And so if you were a male that day, the top event you received, for example, on your Rule a Lot email was men's Spanx, and we all sat around and were like, this is a situation where we clearly should have developed some type of logic or business rules that make sure that we're not just kind of blindly using whatever the data might say is the best thing to do because it's a men's event, it should definitely go first above something else. Right. And so it's making sure that there's always a kind of that reality check or gut check around, hey, is this going to just break some fundamental things that we know we should not be doing?
Yeah, that goes back to my example that we were talking about earlier with Amazon. I was telling George about the personalized email that I got from Amazon last week, which was deals for me, which was a book that was somewhat related to another book that I bought, Halloween costumes, baking flour, and a chainsaw. So clearly the algorithm put together that email, but it was a disaster.
Right. So, in terms of that, what are the sort of nastiest surprises you've gotten out of this stuff? I mean, obviously, putting up Spanx is probably the worst one I can imagine for that. But, in terms of things, what are the surprises you've seen? I mean, obviously, one of the things we're hoping to discover with big data and all these other things is things we didn't expect, right? The problems or needs that we aren't able to predict up front. So, how are you looking at that? Are there things you've found in the data that you're looking at that said, oh, this is actually a different direction, this is something we need to do, that we didn't expect to have to do?
I think one thing I could mention there, one unwelcome surprise is when you spend a whole bunch of time building some new capability on your site, and then it makes things worse. And if you've been building products, it just happens, And what do you do when that happens? Do you roll everything back? Do you freak out? Hopefully you don't, but you have to expect that some portion of the time that's going to happen. And I think analytics and testing has actually been very, very helpful in those contexts, where one way to avoid that is by doing progressive rollouts, where you have some big new feature, roll it out to 2% of your traffic, see how it does, roll it out to 10% of your traffic. And that way you don't get into kind of an all or nothing mindset and launch something before it's ready. I think another is you also realize that very small changes can have huge impacts. Talking about the registration flow, which is crucial for rule of law. We experimented with some very small changes recently, and took a developer less than a day to do, and it increased the throughput of the registration process by 20%, which reduces your cost of acquisition by 20%. Just massive impacts, and so I think measuring what you do, staying open to small changes, not freaking out, all help with those issues.
Excellent. Cool. So I'm going to leave a couple minutes for a question. So the last question. What does the future look like for analytics? I mean, where are we going from here? And what should we be caring about next year, 2 years from now, maybe 5 years from now? And I'm asking you to do something that's actually impossible. So.
I think our focus is just to be, I think historically, and right or wrong, we've been very rear view mirror looking. And I think our goal and our hope for the future is to be much more predictive in terms of what we're trying to do and accomplishing, and spending less time understanding how something 6 months ago performed and how that should impact the future, but being able to do much more analysis upfront to model what the future will look like. Obviously guided by what's happened in the past, but I think we are slowly getting there, like I'm sure any organization is, but it's probably to be much more predictive and a lot less rear view facing.
I would just say try to figure out how to be flexible, because none of us know what's going to be there in 12 months, 18 months, and out. The technology is going to change. The customers are going to change. It's just you got to be flexible and not get stuck in any one way of thinking or operating or building.
And I would say it's good to pay attention to the full spectrum of analytics projects, all the way from the very most basic and fundamental up to the very innovative and experimental. And I'd say most companies don't get the basics right, and just getting mobile web, desktop web, iPhone, Android to talk together and store all that information in one place so you can get a single version of the truth. Most companies can't, and it's really hard to make that happen. And I think that's almost more important than anything else, because if you don't have that, you don't know what's happening. I think on the more experimental end, you have crazy innovation around cookies and retargeting and the information aggregators, all kind of scary but incredibly powerful, where people are creating super cookies and things like that. One example would be with Facebook, the ability to do lookalike targeting, where you send them information about people who are your best customers, and they say, okay, we'll find people who are like those to promote your products to. Amazingly effective. It works great. And who would have thought that would have been possible? And social targeting, how do you target friends of yours? So I think paying attention to both ends of that spectrum is good.
And I would just add one final thing for the marketers in the room, in that just think about where you're sending your data, because your customer data, all of your click data, every time you put a pixel on your site, that data is going to another vendor. Every time you join a pool, a co-op, something like that, all of your customer data is going out to a third party. So that's one of the things that we're thinking about, is just who has our data and what can we do to protect it, because it could easily get out of hand and get in the wrong hands.
That's a great point. Excellent. Thank you. So any questions? Anyone want to have a question for the panel? Way back there. Sorry, I think we have to, the microphones are like all the way up here, so I'll actually ask you, if you have questions, maybe come up front a little bit. Sure.
Rule of Law went from 2 million to 9 million, members over a 2-3 year span, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. Do you have any advice on how to get members like that to membership companies like myself?
I think the thing that we spent a lot of time looking at was like the viral coefficient. Like that was our secret sauce for particularly the first 3-4 years of this business, was trying to optimize to figure out how to get Joe to tell Mary and Mary to tell Susie, and doing everything in our power to make sure that we're both providing the great experience that they want to tell people, but really understanding what the drivers are that would prompt them to want to tell people. And so we looked at everything from the site experience and the things we could do on the site to encourage them to refer, to really understanding the customer service drivers that kind of would lower NPS, that would make them less likely to refer. And a lot of our marketing efforts, particularly in the early days, was really spent on referral. And we're a bit of a unique beast in the sense that, we force people. We were a shopping site that it forced people to join. That was somewhat unheard of in the early days of Real Allah, and so it was somewhat naturally interesting, and you'd be telling folks. But that was really the secret sauce, and continues to be a large portion of it for Rue, is referral, and figuring out how you can drive people to tell others.
So I think there was another question in here.
I don't think I would build a custom analytics package internally. I think there are vendors out there who are experts. I'm certainly not an expert on what all those tools are, but for us, we're not, that's not one of our areas of expertise, is building software. So we sell jewelry, so I would rely on the vendors for that.